So Ken Holland is no longer going to be the general manager of the Edmonton Oilers. Ken Holland was brought in on a 5-year contract, and they're going to let that deal expire. Holland's up there in age, 68 years old, so most likely going to be retiring. But before getting into the rest of the video, I appreciate if you guys could drop a like, comment, and subscribe if you've not already, but let's keep going. Holland's Oilers did make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, to Game 7, and had the chance to raise their greatest trophy in all of sports, but just fell short. Holland won some Stanley Cups in the late 90s and 2000s with the Detroit Red Wings, but after that great run of success, they kept making the playoffs, but they did not remain as a top contender in the NHL. So when he came over here to the Edmonton Oilers, some people were skeptical of how well he could do to turn around this franchise and finally become a consistent contender. I'm going to start off with some of the good stuff that I think Holland did. Zach Hyman has been a terrific fit with Connor McDavid, and on this Oilers squad, he has been extremely productive. I think the Ekholm trade was also a very solid move. Ekholm was very steady for the Nashville Predators, and he's been very steady for the Edmonton Oilers. The Ryan Nugent-Hopkins deal, with only a $5.125 million cap hit per year for what he gives you, that's not a bad hit, and as the cap rises, his deal will look better and better as time goes on. And while we're not exactly sure who made the call to fire Woodcroft, but it was a terrific move regardless, and he was the general manager. When they switched to Chris Knoblauch, this team really took off. So there's some positives, and again, one game shy of winning a Stanley Cup. That's definitely a great performance. But for some of the good that Holland has done, we have to also talk about some of the bad. The Jack Campbell contract, that has aged extremely terribly. Campbell's not even in the NHL anymore. He was signed to a 5-year, $25 million deal. And while some people were skeptical of the deal at the time, I don't think anybody saw what happened to Campbell happening to him so quickly. The Darnell Nurse extension, making him a $9.25 million defenseman was just a horrific idea. Nurse is okay enough, but is he $9.25 million worth? Absolutely not. You could even refer to Kassian when he was having a very good year, and then they signed him to a 4-year, $12.8 million extension. Yeah, not necessarily the best way to spend your money. And outside of the players, the trades, and things of that nature, because some of that might continue to age well or could age poorly as time goes on, Ken Holland also gave up a lot of draft capital to win now. Now, it does make sense. You have McDavid, draisaitl, a lot of these fantastic players in their prime. You want to hit while the iron's hot, but this could have some negative ramifications for them going forward. While the Oilers do have some very good young players, as a whole, their prospect pool is not looked at very highly. It's not very deep. So that is something that will have to change as time goes on. So if I was to evaluate his performance as a general manager, what would it be? Well, there's a lot of good, but there's also a lot of bad. In that Jack Campbell contract, it's not great. Darnell Nurse at $9.25 million. Wondering if you're smoking crack. And dealing a lot of your futures can bite you in the butt in the long term. But to be fair, he did ink some players to some solid extensions. Whether it was him or the guy above him, they did bring in Chris Knoblauch to round this team into form and got them to a Stanley Cup final. And he wasn't afraid to go out there and make trades or signings mid-season to make the team better throughout his tenure. So what would the rating for Ken Holland's performance as general manager for the Edmonton Oilers be? This is kind of tough because recency bias. The Oilers did just go to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. They could have won the Stanley Cup this year. But looking at the totality of his tenure, while the Oilers became a consistent presence in the playoffs, I think long term there's going to be a lot of negatives that comes out of his tenure as a general manager. So I'll give him a C+. There's some good, but there's a lot of bad in here that could affect the future of the Edmonton Oilers. But I'd like to know your thoughts down below in the comments section. What did you think of Ken Holland's tenure as general manager for the Edmonton Oilers? And Oiler fans, if you could have a dream GM, who would it be? I'm Captain Paul. Appreciate you watching. I'll see you in the next one.